Good afternoon. Welcome to the June 5th, 2025 meeting of the Baltimore City Planning Commission, meeting number 2073. My name is John Laria. I'm the Commission Chair. Seated next to me is Chris Ryer, our Planning Director and Executive Secretary. And would you please, Mr. Executive Secretary, call the roll?
Robin Allen.
Present.
The Honorable John Bullock.
Present.
Christine Griffin is not present today from DPW. Talib Horn.
Present.
Claudia Jolin.
Present.
Douglas McCoach.
Present.
Justin Williams. Eric Stevenson.
Present.
And John Laria.
Present. Okay, we have a quorum. We'll move to the agenda, approval of the minutes. Commissioners, is there a motion to approve minutes from the, May 15th meeting? Is that right? Yes, May 15th meeting. A motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll turn now to the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes only the CIP transfers. I've been talked out of reading all the CIP transfers out loud, although I'm saying that in part in anticipation of this much improved, really terrifically improved and CIP process. I did add just a couple of very quick questions, and I asked Ms. Parnillum to be available to us. If Commissioner Jolin?
Yeah, Jim, we have 3 on the consent agenda or only 1?
You know, it's funny, those are, what I'm looking at on my screen has the 2 minor subdivisions on the regular. Maybe it's just a typo. On the Wix site, they are under regular, and I'm happy to move them to consent.
Yeah, those are minor subdivisions. Yeah, the divider on Wix is in the wrong spot. Minor subdivisions are on consent. Sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner Jolin. Thank you for paying attention. Appreciate it. So, Ms. Parnillum, just a couple of very quick questions, and if you know the answer is great. If not, you can always get back to us. What I was focusing on, not surprisingly, are just a few items where it says not consistent with the CIP. Now, the staff has recommended approval of all of them, and that's not objectionable, but it's a different category than, just purely consistent. So a couple are, with respect to, there's a note that says the Pinder Hughes School, you're moving money from Pinder Hughes School renovation because it's not, no investment or capital planning is required. Allowing existing funds to be reallocated. It's apparently under an ENP with Salvation Army. Did we just think that we were going to have to put money into it and for some reason now we're not going to because of some reason? Do you know?
The funds for Pinder Hughes were originally allocated many, many years ago. Mm-hmm. As that process for finding a reuse for that surplus school has moved forward, HCD has found a user, Salvation Army, and is selling that property as far as I understand. So DGS no longer needs to use the original allocation for that building.
Okay, thank you. And you have 2 items, 5 and 6, in which you're transferring funds from the home program reserve to Perkins 4A to cover hard construction costs, and you say it's not consistent. I mean, those seem, is that just because it's not strictly in the home program? Because the purpose seems fairly consistent, but it's a more of a technical distinction.
And that's why we're recommending approval. But this Perkins was not part of the original project for the home program. So this is
And then my last one, if you don't mind, transfer 11. There's a transfer from Claremont Freedom Village water revenue bonds to a water main replacement on Reisterstown Road. Funds are coming from a prior water main replacement project that has been completed. Was that completed recently or a while ago? Do you happen to know?
I do not happen to know. I don't know, Nelson, if DPW. Okay. We're going to see if we have more information on that. I don't know off the top of my head.
I only ask because I associate Claremont Freedom Village with something that happened a while ago, and I was just wondering if it took us a while to figure out. It says that project has excess appropriations, and it just goes back to the financial hygiene stuff that we've been talking about, which is how long does it take us to realize that we have money that we can spend on stuff? And if the answer is it was only completed recently, that's maybe a little different. So that's why I was asking.
It's actually, I think, the last phase is under construction now.
Is that of Claremont Freedom?
Next to Curly, is under construction.
I will tell you that we haven't been doing those sweeps since the transition to Workday. The finance has not been closing out projects, and so those balances have been remaining in those projects. So that's something that we will be sweeping once we do the funding source rules implementation that Director Ryer mentioned is our next step in in all of these
Yep.
cleanup steps. So yes, that cleanup of kind of excess funds when a project is completed hasn't been happening for the last few years.
Yeah, I imagine these are the kinds of questions, if this is really going to come to us first, and you say to us, here's the transfer, and it's consistent with, it probably will have a rhythm, where it'll be, well, it's consistent, we understand what that means, then there'll be another category
Yep.
we talked about, so I'm just sort of asking these questions a little bit after the fact, but.
Yep, no, I
So
appreciate that.
I'd be interested in knowing the answer, not a giant concern.
We will find out and let you know.
Thank you very much. Okay. Are there other questions? I know it's on the consent agenda, but are there other questions about CIP transfers, everybody's favorite topic? Okay. If not, is there a motion to approve the CIP transfers as presented?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Okay, so those are approved.
And you won't see any at the next couple of meetings because we're pausing in order to do the funding source rules implementation. So you'll see transfers again, hopefully under the new process if we're successful in getting that through the, activated.
Will diminish the quality of the meetings, no doubt, to not have the CIP. But thank you very much, and thanks for your continued work. Okay, so now, 2 items, minor subdivision, final plan. Do you want to read them for us, Mr. Executive Secretary? And we'll just take these both together as a consent,
sure.
Consent item,
Yep.
please?
First item, minor subdivision final plan for 201 Homeland Avenue in the 4th District. Second is a minor subdivision final plan at 3800 Roland Avenue in the 14th District.
Okay, those are on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve those items number 4 and 5?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to our regular agenda. Mr. Executive Secretary.
The first item on the regular agenda is City Schools 2025 Comprehensive Educational Facilities Master Plan. Who will present? Nelson will present.
Good afternoon, Nelson Vasconcelos, Capital Budget Analyst for Department of Planning. And with us, we have Maureen Gershberg. She is Director of Planning and
Facilities Planning and Strategy for Baltimore City Public Schools.
Thanks, Maureen. So for the 2025 master plan, do we have Eric? Oh, thank you.
Button is forward small, button is back.
Cheers. So the state requires the annual facilities master plan from city schools. It's used to evaluate resources, inform decisions related to investment in future needs. Maureen will go through more detail on that in just shortly. But some of those investment decisions include the CIP, the review portfolio decisions around school closures, the 21st Century Buildings Plan, Built to Learn Plan, as well as other investments. Just to provide a little bit of context, we've been looking at city schools enrollment, and much like the city's population showed a slight increase, city schools enrollment showed a slight increase after about a decade of decline. And that is largely due to the increased Latino population growth within the city of Baltimore. And here's a look at utilization. And Maureen, again, will go into a little bit more detail around utilization rates, but you can see that the utilization is at 87%, which is right near the sort of target, but it is a little bit unbalanced. Our elementaries and elementary middle schools have, or elementary middles, excuse me, have higher utilization rates. And planning, we do recommend approving the CFMP.
So good afternoon. My name is Maureen Gershberg. I'm the Director of Facilities Planning and Strategy for Baltimore City Public Schools. And today we'll be going over the 2025 Comprehensive Educational Facilities Master Plan that we refer to as the CEFMP. Okay. The CEFMP aligns with our board priority 3. So the CEFMP in district context, it's more than just a state requirement. It's really more of a continuous process where trends are analyzed, captured within the document, and ultimately used to inform district decisions. These are the topics we'll be walking through. They cover the trends and issues that consistently impact facilities planning. As we're all aware, Baltimore City population is potentially stabilizing, or at least we had a year of increase. A one-year data point is not indicative of a total change in the trend. However, we are optimistic given those some of the factors that Nelson had listed. The Baltimore City public school enrollment often mirrors some of the trends that are happening within the larger city. And so, yeah, this year we saw over 1,000 student gain, which is very significant, as Nelson mentioned, after about a decade of losses since 2015. All right, so we're going to talk a lot about losses and gains in our population, and then also just kind of how that works out in terms of where we have seats. So the biggest factors that contributed to the change in trend this year was definitely the increasing Latino population, but then also we saw significantly less losses among our Black student population. We were previously seeing losses of over 1,800 Black students a year in terms of our enrollment, and this year it was only, I think, about 474. And so those two coupled together really were the biggest driver in us being able to reverse that change. This map here shows the changes in student population since 2015. And these are trends that we've been seeing for a decade. The emptying out in West Baltimore, the huge increases that we're seeing in South, Southeast, Northwest. I like this map a lot because it helps demonstrate the inconsistent demographic patterns we have in Baltimore City. We'll get into district-wide data points later when we discuss utilization, but often where we have extra seats is not where they are most needed. And that's something that we've just been grappling with for decades now, honestly. Baltimore has had significant demographic changes since the 1960s, which is a very rough average of when most of our schools were built. This graph demonstrates that historical inverse relationship between the gains in Latino population and our losses in our Black population. That does change a little bit for this past school year, 24-25, where the Black population did slightly level off. Here's a map showing our Latino students. This probably looks very similar to the map that we saw with the changing student populations, and it's going to look very similar to our utilization map that we show later. The pockets that you see here are going to be very much in alignment with those overutilized areas. One of the requirements for the CEFMP for the state is 10-year enrollment projections. So while we have been losing students for the past 10 years, we were previously estimating that 10 years out we'd lose about 5,000 kids. We only have 1 year's worth of data where our enrollment went up, so we can't say definitively that in 10 years we're actually going to be higher than where we are now. We don't feel confident saying that just yet. However, we did decrease the overall loss 10 years out from that previous 5K to 3K now. And then if we are able to get a couple more years of enrollment data where that trend is still increasing, then the hope is that eventually that projected enrollment might maybe plateau or potentially even increase depending on where we go. So we look at birth rates as part of the projections since they help inform kindergarten projections. The big takeaways on this are that people have been having less kids for several years now, just nationwide. That is a fact. And so common sense would say, oh, if there are less babies, the kindergarten enrollment 5 years later will go down. However, we did the opposite. So you can see that red line 5 years ago, the babies went down, but we actually went up with our kindergarten enrollment. And that's because of the in-migration happening, particularly with our Latino demographic. So that's exciting news for us. We are very excited about the increasing enrollment and just kind of how it's showing itself with our data points. I do want to note that if you look at the red line, the births from 5 years ago, it plateaus next year and then has quite a dip the following year. That aligns with the pandemic years, so 2020, 2021. There was a lot less kids that occurred that year. And so we are definitely keeping our eye 2 years out on what happens then, because that'll be a pretty good indicator on how strong our trend is of our in-migration versus that relationship with the births. All right, utilization. Utilization is the enrollment of a building divided by the state-rated capacity, also called the SRC. Ideal utilization is around 86%. There are requirements from the state for capital improvement program dollars regarding utilization. You need to have a 60% utilization to be awarded funds for CIP for that specific building. This means that, and we're also highly reliant upon the state for our capital funding, and that means that we are less able to move projects forward within the CIP program than, say, other jurisdictions that might have more funding on hand to be able to do what they want regardless of state requirements. Let's see. The overall district utilization rate for SY 24-25 is 87%, but it is projected to decrease since we are estimating out-year losses of about 3,000 students 10 years out. And then also we have several projects in the queue that are going to be adding some seats. Not a lot, but they are adding some. So you'll see that change in the out years. This chart shows the percentage of seats by grade band. And keep in mind that our buildings come in all different sizes. So there's more square footage in 19 high school buildings than there is for 41 elementary buildings. Keep that in mind, though. This is the proportion of our secondary. It's about 2/3 of our portfolio, and then elementary, middle, and elementary make up about, 1/3 for high school and middle high, which is secondary, and then 2/3 for elementary and elementary middle. And so if we go to the next slide, this is what Nelson had shared. Overall, we're 87%, but if you zoom in on those different grade bands, you can see that we're all over the place. It's not consistent. We have a lack of seats at the elementary and elementary middle, and a lot of our excess seats are at the high and middle high. And buildings, you can't just cut off a chunk and move it to where you need it to be. And so it's always, we're always looking at our available seats and how we can best strategize on how to use them. All right, this shows our elementary and elementary middle schools by school zone. And similar to what I had shared before, you can see we have a lot of overcrowding in that southeast area. We have it in the south area and then in the northwest. And then we see a lot of blues and greens and yellows in West Baltimore. And this aligns with where we've seen those demographic changes over the years. We have made a lot of progress since the beginning of the 21st Century Buildings Plan for surplusing excess seats. We've surplused over 2.7 million square feet since the beginning of the 21st Century Buildings Program, which was a program that allowed us to obtain money to renovate or rebuild. It was originally up to 28 new schools, and as part of that commitment, we committed to surplusing a certain number of buildings.
Could I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Can you go back a slide? Do you have a schedule of some kind? Sorry, can you do that?
I'm so sorry, I went the wrong way.
No,
It's still going
sorry.
the wrong way. Okay. There we go.
Thank you. Do you have a schedule that shows what happened in those surplusings? Did they get conveyed? I mean, I just don't remember how it works and where generally they have gone as part of the surplusing process.
So once we turn a building over to the city, the term works with the
Right,
other
because the city
agencies.
owns the real estate, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you vacate it as a school and then the city does as it wants to with the vacant property?
Yes, except in two circumstances where it was demolished immediately after.
But even then, the city then has to deal with the property itself, right?
Those specific circumstances, the property remained with us.
Oh, it did?
It was the William C. March building where Hartford Heights is located. And then it was the core It was the old modular at the William Pool Building.
Is that because you're building new facilities on those sites?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Is there someone, and it may not be the schools, but I'll just leave this question. Is there a schedule somewhere that shows the ultimate disposition of these surplus schools?
Yeah, I'm wondering whether it has all 30, but we maintain a website. We're in the process of transferring it to DHCD. I believe historically it contains all 30, but I really have to check. It's a .com, Baltimore Surplus School.com site. It's separate from the city, the regular site. And it has a status for each property. So if it's been disposed on, it's definitely on there. About half a dozen are pending, meaning that they're not disposed of.
And do those go via some sort of RFP, or does the city seek, I just,
So that is
imagine
the
there's a whole-
issue. It's a cumbersome process.
The whole process that's required, unless that's changed.
Well, that's the state process for transferring it to us, which involves paying off the debt on the properties. And then when we get it, we have an ordinance process. A part of the ordinance process is an RFP.
So I don't want to hold this up, but the question I'm driving at, and it's probably not a school's question, but maybe the department can follow up, is I'm just wondering what the sort of process is by which we decide what we want to do with these often well-located, often sizable sites in the middle of communities. And, how are we doing that? And are we doing it in a way that is sort of maximizing the benefit for the communities and for the city?
Well, we work closely with the communities.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Work closely, so our community planners go out and work with the neighborhood where the school is on the RFP, is a short answer to your question.
Yeah,
Councilman, please.
and I've gone through this process. I can talk about Alexander Hamilton, for instance, but there have been some processes have been successful, others haven't. It's contingent oftentimes on the availability of funds for the applicant. It could take several months to go through the whole community process. But for instance, for Alexander Hamilton, that building's now being utilized by Catholic Charities as an intergenerational center. But we've had some hurdles with some of the other buildings where it's been going through the process, awarded to an entity, but that entity might not have been able to follow through with the entire fit out, and then has to be re-advertised again.
So not to hold this up, but could someone just provide some sort of a list that at least takes those schools and sort of status of disposition and so on?
It's online.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
there's a map.
send me the link and I'll be happy.
Inventory and a map.
Okay. All right, back to you. Sorry. Thanks.
All right. School enrollment patterns choice. Determining the number of seats needed in a specific zone or geographic area in a choice district is hard. The K-5 out-of-zone rate for this past school year was 45%. If you take that 45%, about half of those out-of-zone kids are attending a charter or they're in specialized programming. They might be homeless. But the other half of that 45%, they don't fall into any categories. They're just families exercising their right to choice.
You sort of implied the planning challenge that presents when people have the ability to move around unpredictably. What's the benefit that we think it provides? I know that's something that, Baltimore City does unique compared to a lot of districts.
Yes, so a choice district means that you aren't necessarily, the school that you attend isn't necessarily the one that you
Sure.
live close to. And that means that maybe if you live in a community with less resources, you do have a little more autonomy in being able to go elsewhere. You're not locked into that the way you might be in the county. And then we also, there's a lot more academic variety. We offer a lot of options and specialized programming. And so Baltimore City Public Schools, that's important for us to be able to offer to our families that choice so that families have more autonomy to determine what program that they think might best serve them.
How do you, in the planning, account for that when we're looking at the attendance numbers? And so, for example, when we say that attendance in West Baltimore continues to decline, and we look at the map that you had up there that showed, how many schools that have been closed in West Baltimore, and it becomes this chicken and egg, thing.
Yeah. Yes.
But how do we at least just have, do you have any idea, I guess you mentioned the 45% and everything, but is there any way to look at that alongside of the district attendance numbers and say, these are the attendance trends partly influenced by school choice, but if there were a 21st century school in this area, there's the potential to reverse that trend and even bring in students from adjacent neighborhoods. So I just wonder if you think about that at all.
Absolutely. And so it gets weedy real quick. But there's definitely trends that help guide us when we do make decisions around where seats are needed and sizing. For example, our Latino families, they don't like to travel. They stay close to home. They will go to their zone schools. And so that's easy and that's nice. With our, especially West Baltimore, our Black families over there, there's definitely more choice exercised. And so when we look at decisions, we look at proposals as part of our annual review team each year, we are looking at, there might be a school X here, what zones are predominantly feeding that school? It might not necessarily, we're not just saying, what's the number of kids in that zone? We look at that as well, but we look at the current trends. That being said, leadership could change and that can change overnight. So we do keep that in mind. We also we call it new school effect. So when we plan projections for the upcoming years, if we know we have a new school coming online and we feel pretty confident about its ability to kind of draw people in. So we have Frederick Douglass coming in, opening up next summer. So the projections this year, we took that into account. We didn't just take the straight math. We bumped it up a little extra, saying we anticipate a little extra there. So it's not a perfect, there is some subjective layers in there, but we also have a good history of data to help inform that subjective, those considerations.
Thank you.
And if I may jump in and provide some larger context, as a Baltimore native and someone who's old enough to see back about a little more than 6 decades, and having matriculated through city schools, we had zone schools, except for City Poly, maybe 1 or 2 more, can't remember, throughout the grades, neighborhood zone schools, just like most school districts probably everywhere at one time. And it's more chicken and egg than you think, because there were issues, many of them having to do with inequity throughout the city, neighborhoods, schools not receiving the money, attention, and so forth that they needed, and that started in the early 60s, right about the time I started school. You saw it. Demographic changes in the city. I won't get into detail, but I think you know some of the history. And people either moved or left the city altogether, and there were schools that were left with low utilization rates, and therefore then they didn't qualify to get funding from the state, certainly, to keep the buildings up. And some people leave because of the state of the buildings, because that starts to reflect what's going on in the school to some degree, to some people. May or may not be true. And it was sort of a ripple effect over decades. And then when I went to the school system, the state was demanding that you close low utilization schools at every grade level where that occurred, because they were not going to give funding to fix them. So it was more of a ripple effect. And it's interesting to me that this is really the same problem, even though they've done tremendous things to close schools, to build new schools, to do renovations in existing schools and so forth. But there's still trends with population that are tied to some of the same issues that existed over the decades that I'm speaking to. So I don't know what the answers are, but I don't mean to sound doom and gloom, but those are the facts. So I don't know that recreating zones would be the answer. That's my point.
So we do have zones, but just it'd be implementing the more traditional methodology that other jurisdictions. Yeah.
Because in fact, when I left 2012, I want to say, I believe there was more at the elementary level. I believe there was more requirement for attending a zone school. I think there were fewer exceptions, certainly charter children who were determined to be unhoused, and there are different categories for that, have the right to remain at the school where they were attending before they lost their housing or other stipulations. There were fewer than what I heard a few minutes ago, and it seems to have changed. And I think, that's an equity issue. People should have, there are a lot of differences in what people have had access to, and I think this is addressing that. But then you get to the question that Commissioner Stevenson asked. So they're writing it, but it's still, in process.
Thank you. Thank you for the perspective. Please.
Okay. All right, next we're going to talk about developments. So our office does work closely with city planning, and we follow the approval meetings and the new developments that are approved, underway, and then ultimately completed. So in Baltimore, new developments actually rarely yield new students coming into the district. If a development does attract families, they're likely being poached from another part of the city. That's one trend that we've definitely found. There are several developments on here. We have something called a student yield calculator where we've taken historic data, we've overlaid the number of kids that come from that housing type in that specific area to try and estimate how many kids a development will yield. And so this map uses that calculator. However, you need to take it with a grain of salt. The two primary developments that are on our radar are Perkins Somerset Old Town and Keys Point. For Keys Point, that's the second phase of an HABC-owned development, and that's in far southeast Baltimore, where we definitely have our eye on that for the current overcrowding. The current overcrowding occurring in that part of Baltimore right now between John Rura, Graceland Halliburtt, and Graceland, O'Donnell Heights, Halliburtt. That's 3 school zones. We could fill an entire school with the amount of overcrowding that's happening right here. And actually, that's why this past January, our annual review, one of our recommendations was to retain the southeast building, which is right over there in that part of the city. It's where Commodore John Rogers is currently swinging. Once they move out January 27, it is our hope to open a new program there, summer 27, to be able to alleviate the overcrowding in that part of the city. So that development, Keys Point, is currently approved. And so there are plans in the works to be able to address the current overcrowding and then any additional students that would come online as part of that development. The other development that's on our radar is obviously Perkins Somerset Old Town. We've been working closely with the city on that. And there is a new school that is underway. It should be, I should know this. I want to say summer 28. I believe summer 28 is when it's going to open. And so we will have enough seats for all the students in that. I think it's around 900 seat building. Yeah. And so we are keeping our eye on it though, just in terms of the timing of the phasing, because the kids are starting to come back now, but the school has a limited number of seats right now. So we are keeping our eye on that to see if we need to do any additional strategizing in the meantime. One of the questions that we received both here at the Planning Commission briefing meeting and then also from our board is just a question around the economic status of our students who are coming in versus those that are leaving and whatnot. And it's actually a really hard metric to follow. We have something called direct certification, which is something that students, if they submit the forms, we are able to document it and apply for Title IX funding at concentration of poverty funding. However, that is not perfect. It often frequently undercounts our Latino students. And so a methodology that we did try was we took city planning's housing market typology and overlaid it with our student addresses. And the results, we didn't really get anything out of that. It didn't really show any major changes in the last 5 years. You can see that far column. We looked at the changes in the number of students from 1920 to 24-25, and just it was relatively steady in general. And so that is something that people have shown an interest in, and we're thinking through right now how to maybe we could approach that type of study. And we do have a separate study currently underway around our Latino population to be able to try and estimate the number of students coming online within specific schools and areas. As I said earlier, our Latino students do choose to attend their local schools, so that does align at least a little bit in terms of school versus where you live. So we are doing a study on that specifically, and that should be available around July 1st.
Sorry, do you, this middle neighborhood number here, do you have any sense of a trend up or down in middle neighborhoods, enrollment in middle neighborhoods?
No, it's steady. You can see it
This
only
is
went
the
down
only.
0.1%. Yeah, but I think that this is not the best way to gauge it. So it could be twofold. It could be there just haven't been dramatic changes, or it could be that this is not a good methodology. We struggle internally, again, with how to, show or utilize. We don't have a good indicator for economics of our students. Direct cert is flawed in its own way. And again, it undercounts that Latino population.
Maybe that's something we should work together more on.
Did you have in here some data, maybe I missed it or you haven't gotten to it or just not part of this presentation, about students who are going to zone schools versus not? And you mentioned, for example, several times that Latino students tend to go to zone schools. But is there a straightforward sort of set of data that says across the city, or I don't know, by however you might sort it, housing market typology or anything else, where there are the data on whether people are going to zone schools or elsewhere?
We have it by school, and within the final 600-page document, each school, like what the in-zone rate is for that school. We also have several dashboards. Last year's are still up, but that's things that have not changed that much since last year. So I believe if you go to the dashboards, it's listed there as well. It's online. And then just the only slide I have here today is around that this one, where you can see the K-5 out-of-zone rate for each of the zones on that map, and then just the overall out-of-zone rate for K-5. And it's not pre-K-5 because pre-K is tricky. That's funded differently. So you're not guaranteed a seat at your zone school if you're pre-K. K-5, yes.
Okay, thank you.
The current maintenance and capital budget is approximately $375 million less than what we need to maintain our portfolio. And that means we're constantly having to make difficult decisions on what we can do and what we must postpone from a facility perspective. And while we absolutely appreciate the increased funding from Baltimore City this past year and in the coming years, on the other side of that, the state funding from the Healthy Schools Fund is anticipated to decrease FY27 and going forward. City Schools continues to make strides in providing more students with 21st century learning spaces. We actually just opened up Furley yesterday. It was very great. By 2030, almost half of the students in buildings owned by city schools will be in new or renovated spaces. That being said, there will still be 87 buildings unrenovated or not replaced. All right, a new addition to this year's CEF&P is the non-academic consolidation plan. This plan calls for surplusing 3 sites and demolishing 2 buildings. And this will allow us to reduce our non-academic footprint, make us more efficient, and then help bring together certain teams that were previously spread out. This will result in over 400,000 square feet removed from our non-academic portfolio. That's the equivalent of 2 Forest Park high schools, just to give you a ballpark. We have had to put this on pause because of the federal funding cuts that occurred a couple of months ago. So we are recalibrating the timing on when these actions will occur, because it does require us to make improvements at some of the sites. But we do anticipate, we have been talking with the city on both grounds, shop, and Garrison moving forward in the next year. And I always like to end with a plug for our CEF&P dashboard. There's the QR code. We have, I think, six interactive maps where we cover a variety of topics. This one is our school community dashboard. So you could go up there, that right-hand corner, pick the school you want, and learn all about it. Oh, there you go. So yeah, you can see the green section right there is the out-of-zone rate for Baybrook Elementary Middle. And so it has the school compared to the district average.
Is there any sort of aggregation of those in a citywide map by color or something that either exists or could be created? I'm just trying to get a...
So this map here is the out-of-zone rate.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, no worries.
For K-5, what about for the other grades?
So that's trickier because we are officially choice for middle school. We do guarantee seats for the K-5 students. So that's the only official out-of-zone numbers that we publish. Informally, yes, we do pull the numbers for middle school to kind of see if they're attending their elementary middle or not. But we don't have a formal out-of-zone rate for the middle graders.
This is not the place to debate either education policy or transportation policy at the moment, but I'm mindful of this discussion that's been going on about the complexities of our school choice program and the potential impact on transportation issues.
Yes.
I don't know if you have anything to offer on the subject, but...
It's very difficult. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Are there questions?
No, Mr. Chair, I'll also just note my other hat that I wear is also chair of our education committee, and we literally had a hearing around absenteeism and transportation issues related to this ongoing saga. So, understood.
Right. Unintended consequences of well-intentioned policy. It's one of those dilemmas, unfortunately. The question is, are we dealing with the unintended consequences effectively?
Better.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Horn.
Just a couple questions. One is, I was wondering, is the youth homeless population going up and down? In terms
I don't know that data point off the top of my head, but we can certainly pull that.
Yeah, I see it's at 7%. I just didn't know where it was in the past.
So keep these percents, take them with a grain of salt, because a kid could be multilingual and homeless. So like you'll see, these percents don't add up perfectly because people can qualify for multiple things. But if you're specifically asking about the number of homeless students in the district, we can pull those numbers for you.
Thank you. And then I guess my last question is, I know close to $48 million was, I guess, rescinded by the federal government. And one of the things that you were looking at is alternative funding sources. And I was wondering if you could just talk about plans in terms of your alternative funding sources strategy.
I don't know that we have alternative funding sources. What we've been doing is shuffling a lot. So we had previously earmarked money to go towards the non-academic consolidation plan, but we moved some of that to cover a construction project that we need to finish out, because you can't just leave it half finished. We moved some of that maybe to cover some of the tutoring expenses. So it's really more of a shuffling that's occurred right now to kind of cover our bases. And I think even then, I think it was originally 48 million. I think it might not end up being the full 48. I'm not in the weeds with the finance as much, but it wasn't us. If there are folks seeking alternative sources of revenue, I'm not part of those conversations necessarily.
Okay, other questions? So we're being asked to approve this today, Mr. Executive Secretary, is that correct?
Correct.
Is there a motion to approve the plan as has been presented to us?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Executive Secretary, next item, please.
Next item on the agenda, City Council Bill number 25-0073, a zoning conditional use conversion to a banquet hall in the IMU1 zoning district with variances at 1100 Wacomo Street and the 10th Councilmanic District, and City Council Bill number 25-0074, repeal of ordinance 06-222, the planned unit development for 1100 Wycomico Street in the 10th District. Nick Chupin will present.
Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Nick Chupin. I'm the community planner for the Central Southwest District. We have two hand-in-hand bills. 0073 is a conditional use conversion, and 0074 is a planned unit development repeal. They kind of go hand in hand. We will start with the conditional use because it sort of forms the next one.
I'm sorry, it's not sharing correctly online. One moment.
Microphone.
Push the button. Check. Okay.
I'm still not sharing correctly online for some reason. It's behaving differently. Close enough. Try that.
Okay.
Finish slide. Let's change it online. Thank you.
Okay. All right, here we go. Conditional use for a banquet hall in IMU1 zoning district. Petitioners TTV Wacomico LLC, Planning District Southwest, Central Southwest District. Community planner is Nick Chupin, that's me. 1100 Wacomico Street is an 8-story industrial building constructed in 1900. 400,000 square feet, pretty substantial sized building with a adjacent parking deck, 4-story parking deck with 258 spaces. Here you see the aerial view. It's located, I didn't get the zoning on there. It's in the IMU1 district. To the north is residential R8 for the primarily residential row homes, including on that block. To the south are I1 and I2 industrial areas. Stadium districts to the east, Pigtown Main Street is about 3 blocks to the north. Here you can see the building. It's a recognizable building if you're in the area or up on the highway. View from the north. Applicant is interested in hosting events, weddings, corporate events, and so forth on the 8th floor. It's a nice, wide open industrial space. This is a conditional use in the IMU1 district and subject to council ordinance. That's essentially why we're here. Approval standards, basically the space is suitable for this use. One thing to consider is off-street parking. There is a requirement of 1 space per 10 persons of fire-rated capacity for the banquet hall, in addition to the parking requirements for the rest of the building. There's a parking deck right on the property right next door, plenty of parking, but I think we need to verify the numbers with the fire department. So should a variance be needed, once that's sorted out, that can be amended to this bill.
So you're just telling, you're sort of a placeholder because we don't know yet? We can't really.
That's
So our
correct.
recommendation would be, if a variance is needed, we think it's okay? That's sort of the substance of it?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And I guess potentially, I mean, this is in well in advance of the potential passage of the bills that would eliminate off-street parking requirements entirely, so we're not really.
We believe so, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thanks.
Effect on the community would be minimal. The events in the space would be intermittent and would potentially provide economic development benefits to the area. So we are recommending approval for 0073, the conditional use conversion. Now going into that, there is planned unit development on this site. It's for this site alone. It dates back to 2006, prior to the change in the zoning code. And at the time, the property was zoned M2 for an industrial use. The planned unit development is contiguous with the boundary lines of this one property. It is, I'll just explain it here. It is essentially adding 3 uses that were not permitted at M2-2, which was custom furniture making, furniture store, government offices. This is what Eric refers to as a junk PUD. And essentially, once the property was changed to IMU 1 and the zoning code was rewritten, all of those uses are already allowed in the underlying zoning. There is a URP as well, but that really just refers back to the underlying zoning. So this is really an administrative move to get that PUD out of the way and to allow this banquet hall to be here as well. Is that a straightforward enough description of the whole thing? So also recommending approval for 0074.
Thanks. There's one letter in the record from the Carroll Camden Business Association to Councilwoman Porter, but I guess copied to us, supporting it. I'm not going to read the letter, but it's very clear that it's pleased to provide a letter of support. Says nice things about the business and accomplished development group working well with the community. This will allow them to continue to grow opportunities and offerings, et cetera. The 8th floor is vacant, and the approval would allow it to be put into use. So that's a strong letter from the Carroll Camden Business Association. Are there questions for staff before we turn to see Mr. McCoach?
One quick question. Do you know the size of the proposed banquet hall out of the 400,000 square feet?
The 8th floor is about 50,000 square feet. It could be all or some of that 8th floor.
Okay, and the other tenants would conform with the existing zoning on the site?
That's right. We went through all of the existing uses and everything is conforming with IMU 1. Yeah.
Is there someone here on behalf of the applicant?
Yes.
Would you like to come forward?
I'll say he covered most of it. The one thing I would add is, since you didn't mention.
Please come up and just give us your name and so on, please.
Thank y'all for having us. I'm Biff Browning, working as a consultant for 1100 Wacomico. As Nick mentioned, we do have our own parking garage. It's 300 units. We have quite often in the past used this for conventions and things with multi-day permits that we've had to go through this process. The fire department's already approved based on that, so I don't see the off-street parking being an issue. On the other, all the tenants support it because most of the activities, while we could have weddings and other events, will be geared around kind of corporate retreats. We've had actually, Baltimore City Public Schools has had a meeting with all of their principals before. It's one of the few places that are easily accessible both from within the city and off the highway. Has full parking, so it doesn't become a problem for that, and has both cargo elevators and permanent elevators, so when they're bringing up display items, we just see that rather than having to go every time, it was smarter to go through since it was just a conditional use and get it approved permanently.
Thank you. I was going to ask you to explain the use, which you've just done, so thanks very much. Okay. Are there questions for the applicant before we see if anybody else wants to be heard? Hearing none. Is there anybody else in the audience who wishes to be heard either for or against this item? Okay, hearing none. Well, we'll conclude then public testimony. Is there a motion to support the staff recommendations on these 2 items and 2 city council bills?
Move staff recommendation for approval.
Is there a second? Second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nick. Okay.
Next item on the agenda is a major subdivision, final plans for Westport Parcel B, red line changes in the 10th Councilmatic District. Austin Davis will present.
All righty. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So we have Westport again, and right now we have just the parcel outlined on the map. I think we're very familiar with the site, so I'll kind of breeze through this, but I do want to point out this is the approved subdivision, and if you go on Code Map, you can even see, you can see these parcels now. They were recorded last year, and as you can see, the red line changes are kind of notated right here. There's been a shift in the orientation of those houses along the first couple sticks entering, and then there's also been a reorganization of the alleys. So the proposed red line changes without the annotations, and the final proposed subdivision plan. I don't think I'll have to go through the entire history again, but as we all know, this has been a long time coming. And this parcel specifically is about 12 acres, 11.92, within the broader One Westport master plan. And the original subdivision had 246 row homes, and as I mentioned, this red line amendment is to revise the street alignments, block structure, and lot configuration to reflect the updated development constraints. As I mentioned, lot lines, roadway alignments, and total unit counts and layouts have changed. The red line revisions do not alter the total acreage or public easement obligations, but do affect the configuration of development and access within the parcel. And here's kind of a breakdown of the approved plan and the red line changes. So at addition of 3 units, their circulation has been revised along Boojum and the alleys kind of corresponding to them. I think because of the lot line shift, there's actually a slight change in acreage, but this could just be me measuring wrong in GIS. And then the changes are kind of not too significant in terms of the park interface, and it's consistent with the 2023 waiver. So as I mentioned, it does slightly increase the unit count through modest reconfiguration. The most notable changes are the Boojum Street realignment and the Clare Street connectivity. It is worth mentioning that it doesn't have any new viewer corridors or anything like that has changed, but we do think that the configuration kind of limits the natural surveillance and creates a less kind of public active edge as you enter the site. Some more design implications are that although there's no major changes to the housing topology, but the waterfront way and activation along the public parcel are slightly differed. And then just have some quotes from the previous staff reports that kind of mentioned that we wanted Cloman Street to be fully constructed and open to vehicular traffic prior to issuance of UNO permits, and that Cloman Street must be substantially completed, meaning fully functional and inspected prior to the 101st overall townhome UNO permit, and Parcel P park improvements as outlined in the park improvement exhibit from the 21 report must also be bonded and constructed upon BCRP's approval. These improvements must be completed before, and this is where the 101st UNO is issued. So this is, I have this in here because these come from the previous report, and these are very related to the design implications of the overall parcel and the site. With that, planning staff does recommend approval on the red line revisions to the final subdivision for Parcel B, subject to 2 conditions: a phased construction requirement for the Cloman and Boojum Street frontages, and some sort of easement risk contingency as it relates to the maglev corridor. Specifically for the phased construction requirement, we would like to see the applicant submit a phasing plan subject to review and approval by planning staff that demonstrates how the townhomes along Cloman Street and Boojum Street would be constructed either concurrently or in some sort of linked sequence along with the other units of Parcel B. We would also like, if the applicant seeks to revise any previously approved phasing approach, including that sequence of timing or construction for any portion of parcel B, such as the revisions that they shall, resubmit to Planning Commission for review and approval. And we want the phasing plan, to ensure equitable distribution of desirable frontage units and to maintain consistency with the intent and standards of our subdivision regulations. As far as the easement risk contingency as it relates to the maglev corridor, if any portion of the proposed development is affected by legal, regulatory, or access constraints stemming from the maglev easement or associated litigation, then the developer shall notify the Department of Planning within 60 working days, and a revised phasing and site design plan must be submitted to our staff review that clearly addresses how impact units will be screened, buffered, and redesigned to preserve visual continuity and neighborhood context, and how the revised design maintains compliance with the subdivision and frontage regs along the rights of way, particularly with Clement Street. With that said, notice has gone out to the following community organizations and associations, and as I mentioned, staff recommendation is approval with conditions.
I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah.
Boojum Street. I do have questions, but frankly, they relate to the conditions. And if the applicant were to come up and say the conditions are acceptable, I wouldn't have any questions about the conditions. So I think rather than, spend that time on that, are there any other questions for the staff before we ask the applicant to come up? Okay. So the applicant, I suppose, is here. I see Ms. Hecker, Mr. Kraft. Can you come up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Caroline Hecker, Rosenberg, Martin Greenberg, on behalf of the applicant. I am joined by Jamie Frazier on behalf of the developer and John Kraft from Kimley Horn, our civil engineer. I can cut right to the chase. We're not comfortable with the conditions as proposed. Can you put the conditions back up?
Yeah, it's 2 slides back.
Thank you. Sorry. No, I'm sorry. Candidly, we didn't know about the proposed conditions until yesterday. We've been talking to the planning department for months about this project. We were aware of the concern. There seems to be an implication that the planning department doesn't believe that we're ever going to construct that front row of townhouses. We have every intention to do so. It's not in the developer's interest to leave those lots undeveloped. We very much intend and plan for those to be developed. But we were aware that planning was concerned about this issue of backs of houses facing Clement Street in the event that those happened later. We've been proposing suggestions or trying to get a meeting and a discussion with the planning department since March on this, and we haven't been able to get any traction with the planning department in terms of even a meeting to discuss it. So, we had proffered in a letter to the planning department dated March 18th that, one solution might be to make the release of our bonds contingent upon some type of permanent screening being installed in that area of the front row of the townhouses if for some reason relating to the maglev they can't ever be constructed or they can't be constructed even within, we had proffered in our letter a 2-year period following the final UNO for that row of townhouses. The city could, we require us to install landscaping in that area to maintain some sort of, pleasant-looking frontage along Clement Street while we wait for those houses to be developed. We, have every intention of doing that. The concept of a phasing plan is a little bit troubling. I've been involved in a lot of subdivisions, and I've never been in a position where the planning department has required a phasing plan. And, we see a lot of townhouse subdivisions where if one row of the townhouses is ultimately undeveloped, the backs of whatever the next row is will face whatever street is on the, the edge of that development. And in no other case has the Planning Commission required any type of phasing to be implemented or any type of requirement that, these houses be built first before those houses. And it's I was going to say difficult, but frankly impossible to have one builder's ability to perform under their contract be completely contingent on another builder's obligations to construct their portion of the project. And so it really is unworkable for us. I'd also point out that the existing approved development plan and subdivision plan do not include the phasing. This is a new requirement coming up in the context of this very minor revision. And then I guess the last thing I'll point out before I turn it over to Mr. Frazier, who I know wants to speak as well, but the the other side of Cloman Street, this concern about the backs of these houses facing Cloman Street and the fronts of other houses. What you have there is the light rail, and I know we went through this at length in the last hearing about the master plan. This is not a case where you have to be worried about the front of somebody's house is facing into the back of another house. There's a lot of buffer between what will, could potentially be the backs of houses, although we don't really expect it to ultimately be the backs of houses, and the fronts of the next houses over, which are in the existing Westport community. I do want to correct one typo in the staff report about the number of units. The revised number of units is 256, not 249. I just want to make that clear. I don't think that really changes anything.
Yeah, but let's make that note for the record, Mr. Tiso, please.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Frazier, who I know wants to speak, and I may come back up to say some more at the end.
Hey, everybody. So I saw people asking about the odd road name, Boojum, and I'm happy to report that that is the result of the last Planning Commission hearing for this project that I was at when the original, the current plan was approved. I believe, I don't remember who, but somebody suggested they didn't really like the names of our roads and that it would be more appropriate to find something that is culturally relevant. So Boojum, I will just quote from Wikipedia here. So Boojum is named after Ernest Judd Wilson, and that was his nickname because of the sound of the ball bouncing off the wall when he hit it. And he is well known in the Negro Leagues, the Black Sox that played nearby, as the best hitter in the Negro Leagues ever. So it's his nickname. And I tried to name the road Judd Wilson Way, and apparently there's some rule about using an individual's name. So that's where Boojum
if only
came
Mr.
from.
Wilson had a nickname, you could have used it.
Yeah, well,
But you
like
can't use it.
Boojum.
It's kind of an odd rule for that, but anyway.
Fair enough.
Okay.
So that's where that came from. So, and then going on to the phasing issue, I understand the zoning requirement that we can't leave the houses permanently with the backs facing a public street. There's no issue there. We agree. Caroline did an excellent job summarizing. I'm just going to put in my own words, though, which is the builder that is doing everything except that frontage. So they got concerned about the easement that Maglev, which has prompted all this. They're concerned about it from a title issue. Other builders have no concern about it. So we have another builder. The other builder is planning to build in sequence, and there should never be an issue. But yes, there is a potential problem where the other builder doesn't move forward. Now, you should be reassured that as a business that we own those lots, they're of zero value to us, right, sitting there without homes. There's no way we're going to leave those sitting without homes permanently. It's no problem, no way. But beyond that, I can't agree to a phasing plan because that would invalidate the existing contract. It would put a contingency that the builder that isn't doing those lots would never agree to, right? They are now cannot build without, right? And I can't do that retroactively, right? And it's retroactively because this wasn't a requirement when we signed the contracts in the first place. So that's the reality of it. Now, how do we address it? I do believe that, first of all, it's probably not a real issue because there's no way we're not going to let those houses get built. But second is, city's going to be holding bonds, right? And they have the opportunity to call the bonds. We're more than happy to agree that if it's not properly screened in whatever way after a certain period of time, use our bond money, you guys can do it, right? That takes it out of our hands, you guys can fix it if we haven't done it. We're happy to agree to that. We just cannot agree to that, that phasing condition otherwise, for business reasons. That's it.
Thank you. Can we go back to some visual representation of this? Maybe it doesn't matter if it's the red line or the black line or whatever. So the only issue is north of private, not north, I guess it's up, map north of private alley C. Is that correct? Yeah. And the issue, because I heard this last time, but I haven't, like the rest of this commission, I actually haven't seen Westport 16 times. I've only seen it 1.5 now. So. So
it's north of Boojum.
North of Boojum or north of the?
It'd be west.
Is this?
Is it the entire block or just the top?
Just the top row.
Yeah. So It'd be helpful to look at the old plan and the new plan back to back for a
I
second.
don't know if it's.
We saw it a second. It was in the slideshow.
Go back.
But there you go. So that's the old plan, right? And what happened is Maglev, there was a lawsuit.
If you'd like to go up and point, you certainly may. We'll take a microphone with you,
Is this
just.
a pointer? Is this?
Yeah.
It doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Okay.
All right, take the microphone with you, though.
Just take this, otherwise it's just going to be a, to the record. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
We got you.
Yes, we can.
You can? Okay. So this is the currently approved plan, and this easement is where Maglev, if they ever happen, has the right,
Point to the easement for us.
this line right here. So there was a long lawsuit. Maglev wanted to go here. We settled it with the agreement that if Maglev ever happens, they're going to have to tunnel across most of the city anyway, because they're not going to get right of way. So we agreed that, sure, you have an easement along these properties and you could tunnel. So their easement starts 50 feet below grade and they would tunnel underneath. The houses will be there. So really, it's kind of no impact. Our builder had a concern that it could become a title issue. I don't know that it's a reasonable concern because other builders don't have that. But they then said, we don't want this group of houses, or any of these because they're in the easement and that a title issue. So now we go to the other sheet. So as a result of that, we reconfigured, right? And this alley, we just extended it and just extended it. But from a phasing perspective, the concern that you had was already there for all of these units that didn't change, right? And we didn't have a phasing requirement then. The phasing requirement came up because I told the story to planning staff, I guess, during one of the meetings that we had another builder and how this sort of came about. And that's when they said, well, what happens if the other builder never does these lots? Okay, I hear your concern, but how do we resolve that without creating a contractual problem? And that's what I think the bonding does that.
Could you or Ms. Hecker elaborate on the bonding solution? Which does not exist now. It's something you're offering. I'm sorry, I don't like that. But the screening idea, does that exist, or are you proposing it as a sort of compromise between?
We're proposing it as a compromise. I think the way it would work is that it would get incorporated into the bond that we would have to post anyway in connection with the utilities that will be constructed on the site. So, in the event that at the end of whatever time period we agree on or decide is appropriate, if the landscaping hasn't been installed and those houses aren't going to be built, that the city could use the bond funds to pay for that work.
And the issue here, and I'm sorry, this is probably too elementary for everybody, is that the second row south of, planned south of Alley C, those are the backs and they face Cloman Street.
Correct.
Which is arguably an issue in the subdivision regs, although people are debating that because what's it back up to, et cetera, et cetera.
Precisely.
Right? What is, just generally speaking, Cloman exists. What's the sort of rebuild plan for Cloman look like? Is it just Cloman Street, or is it a fancy Cloman Street, or what's the?
Fancy Cloman Street.
I'll come up and easier to show you.
It's a much better Cloman Street.
Okay, so you're asking at the right time because you can hear me, right? Okay, better?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is new Cloman Street. The existing Cloman Street in this area is actually on, these are the CSX lines. Right, so existing Cloman Street is here. This is going to be abandoned and this road is going to be built. And the reason I say it's the right time for you to ask is they actually paved this section this week, right? So this is in Cloman Street.
In the existing conditions, it looks like there's a railroad track there or something?
There are two sets, and this is.
I'm looking at the aerials.
So, okay, and if we have a printed exhibit that I can show you.
Maybe the slides, there's
Here we
aerial
go.
slides.
Is there an aerial in the?
So this is the aerial, and there is right here, running along New Cloman. This is the CSX rail line, which is a freight line. Right. Oh, here, perfect. There you go. So CSX runs here, and then the light rail has a station right here. And so there's two sets of rail lines, and across our frontage, it goes It goes from our frontage, you have the right-of-way for New Cloman Street, you've got right-of-way for CSX, followed by Old Cloman Street, which is vacant, followed by a vertical wall upon which the light rail runs. So there's never going to be anybody that's living with a direct view into the back, right? That area is all other uses for all the way up to these houses. And so there's, but again.
So, yeah, so that's it. So New Cloman is on the water side of the CSX line.
Yeah.
Inside the CSX line.
We're taking it from being in between the rail lines, and it's going to run.
Okay, all right, I understand, thank you. All right. You're right. Our Executive Director has a comment or suggestion, so please go.
Yeah, maybe make a suggestion here. I want to commend Austin for dealing with the magnitude of changes on this project that have been constant, including this one at the relatively last minute. I think that to do our job to the community in Westport, if we're in a situation where we have to install landscaping because of your inability to develop that site, I think that design should be approved now and reviewed by the community.
I guess my response to that would be, why is it being required in this subdivision and not in any other subdivision that the Planning Commission has approved? Like, there's always an opportunity or a chance that something won't get developed. Like, nothing will be built on a site that's proposed. And I don't think there's any greater chance of that happening here than there is in any other subdivision.
I think my answer would be because of the magnitude of changes that the community has experienced with this project, both before you and with you.
I mean, this has been going on for 20 years, this project. Like, there's no question.
This particular one for 5, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's totally fair. I don't know what the precedent is and what kind of precedent it sets for future developments to require some sort of, to make an assumption that there's going to be something not developed that is being proposed.
I think,
I'm sorry.
I mean, I'll finish, but I think the issue all along has been how to integrate the existing row house neighborhood with the new row house neighborhood and not present a welcoming environment.
Well, I guess we're not in the question. Well, my comment is, especially in light of, I hadn't thought about the freight line. It's like there's freight line and light rail and the back of a neighborhood. And so I respect the general planning consideration to integrate at a symbolic level, but the backs of homes will be 300 feet, if not more, from backs of homes that also cross multiple tracks. So just throwing it out there, but I guess not really a question. More of a comment.
Go ahead, Ms. Hecker.
Well, I was going to say, if the issue is, like, should the city install the landscaping or should we install the landscaping? I think, I'll look to.
If I could jump in. So we're not saying that this isn't a concern that if those homes never got built, that we would be in violation. We get that. And we asked I sent a letter March 18th, sent multiple follow-ups, and this conversation, we've been asking to have this so that we didn't end up in the situation we are now, which is you're asking for something that we can't possibly do, or a plan that we could have prepared and talked to you about if we'd known that. But we never had that conversation. We got the conditions received yesterday, and we're here. It's taken a long time to get here. I'm not against, if there's an idea of, if we're going to go forward with the bonding idea, we probably do need to define, in that really weird situation where we didn't do it, the homes didn't get built, we're at the end of the bonds, and you guys say, okay, we're going to build it. Yeah, we probably have to have a scope that defines what that work is. I have no problem with that, right? I don't want to put it in unnecessarily, but if we get to that point where, okay, there's a real risk that this is a permanent situation, then you have the right with the bond, and we can define that scope. I just don't want to get into a phasing plan that creates other issues.
So how long would you propose that period be before someone has the right to do something with the screening?
What we had proposed in our March 18th letter was 2 years from the last UNO permit for the Cloman Street townhouses.
2 years from the last UNO permit. Why does it matter? Why does it matter when the Cloman townhouses were built?
I'm sorry, the group that would have the backs facing the, I guess they're the Boojum Street townhouses.
We could even take it away from, so the answer to your question, because I wrote that letter and that proposed that, the reason is because those units, those UNOs are the ones that would be in violation, and there's no violation without those. But the timing is, after, when we're ready to get off bond, when we're trying to, right?
Close out the project.
Yeah, we're trying to close it out. That seems like the right time. It doesn't have to be tied to the other townhouse. UNOs.
I have a proposal, but I don't want to preempt other people's comments or questions if you do have them. Do you? You do not.
I'm sorry,
Ms. Jones?
I'm just trying to get to the point to which I'm on the same page with everybody, and I think I'm going to reiterate what I'm thinking. So the issue is we have a section of land that is problematic for whatever reason because of maglev, right? So we are concerned that they might not be built for whatever reason, right? Developer saying it's going to happen, just going to be under a different developer. The law says that if they're not developed, then this whole section of row homes is not facing the street. And so that's the problem we're trying to fix. This is the issue. When across the street, those row homes are also not facing the street. So it's, I'm struggling with the problem.
Well, I think I don't want to speak for anybody. I think the problem here is that you can interpret the subdivision rules strictly, which is to say you can't have the backs facing this way without something in front of it. And then the sort of editorial comment on it is, yeah, but look at what's actually going on out there, and does it really make any sense? Because it's a very unusual application. It's a very unusual situation because the backs are facing a bunch of, railroad tracks.
Are we not creating we're assuming something that's probably not going to happen. That's what I'm having a problem with.
I think I can address that. I remember at the last meeting that came up relative to the perception, and I think the potential perception, and I think is based on ongoing issues in the neighborhood, that building the development with the backs of the new homes facing the existing neighborhood would give the impression that it was closed off, that it was not welcoming, it was gated off for all intents and purposes.
But I understand that portion, but that's not the issue. The issue is we are thinking that these might not get built, and so therefore they would be out.
I think what the issue is, they may not get built because of I'm explaining this, I'm not advocating for it. They might not get built because of the potential maglev easement or issues, and as a result, you would have a permanent condition of the backs of houses facing what they would be facing, subject to what I said earlier about a combination of how you evaluate the merits of that situation, which is a combination of what the rules say, what's actually on the ground, and now Commissioner Allen's just introduced another factor, which is, what's fair to the Westport community in terms of how they perceive the project.
Which I heard mentioned at the last meeting.
Understood.
But we've been told multiple times that this is not an issue, it's just a separate developer.
So this is not an issue with the approved plan because there are homes planned to be fronting on Cloman Street. We are going to build those homes. The concern, if I understand it, is what happens if you don't do what's in the approved
What
plan?
happens if it floods? You know what I'm saying?
This is why
I'm a little confused on this argument here. I'm just trying to, with fellow commissioners, if somebody wants, that's why, if we're doing a what if this happens, I'm not sure. We can go into a list of 35 different things of what if this happens.
I guess my response to that, and I know Austin wants to say something, is that consistently through this project, things have changed. and they've changed drastically. And we have a sort of good faith issue with the community, I think, to manage any changes to this project.
I just want to quickly address, so you are not mistaken that things have changed on Westport waterfront overall, but we're talking about Westport Parcel B, and this subdivision has been approved pretty much as is, with the exception of the change that we're talking about here that is driven by a lawsuit that happened subsequent. But we haven't changed 90% of the units, and the only change is extending the alleyways because of that issue. So for this project, I don't think we have an issue with, overt changes or unexpected changes.
I want to make a suggestion or proposal, but you, Mr. Davis, you look like you want to say something, and I want to make sure you get a chance to say it.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, with regard to this whole, it's within our subdivision regulations, section 3.7 and 3.8, that are the potential contentious issues. And it's not so much that there's existing properties that SPACs face streets, but it's the fact that this would be a new development and that we don't want some sort of existing bad or poor design to be implemented again, and especially considering that these are going to be very much so market rate townhouses across from roughly 300 or so existing houses, and if those fronts never exist and maybe a party wall or something is up for an extended period of time, that also goes against our department's equity committee and our overall positive development goals. So that's where we're coming in with this fear. And as Chris mentioned, because there had been so much uncertainty, and especially with this lawsuit, the idea of the phasing plan was just to kind of have some way to confirm everything would happen or if things changed, that we would be more kept in the loop and could help keep the community apprised.
Okay. Well, I don't want to prolong this unnecessarily, but I do want people to be heard. But so my suggestion is the following. And with this context, I first of all accept the fact that if they can be built, they're going to be built because there's so much economic value there, and otherwise, presumably, you don't realize it. So I think the default position is they're going to get built, so it helps. Second, I think one could argue that if someone came in and said this is our development plan, and we're either going to do a strip of townhouses there or we're going to do landscaping, we might say, well, okay, you can do A or B. A is our priority, but if not, there needs to be some sort of proper screening. So what I would propose is, just picking up what the applicant said with a slight modification, I would say if no building permit has been obtained within 1 year of the use and occupancies for those so-called Boojum houses, then landscaping has to be done by the developer as a condition of release of the bond. The 1 year, this is the compromise to that, the 1 year can be extended by application to the planning director. And if the planning director's judgment is, look, we're not going to hold you hostage we're not going to pull the plug because there's actually activity, what's going on at that time, maybe we're just a little bit short of 1 year. So hopefully that provides a situation when if it's reasonable to do this, then the planning director will agree to extend it. If it is not reasonable, or the planning director disagrees, and the planning director will deny it. You can appeal a decision of the planning director to the planning commission. So I think it's appropriate to delegate it to the planning director. And if for some reason you have a real problem with that, you'll come back to the commission. So that's my proposed compromise. And I hope that's acceptable and we don't have to continue to dig at it. But I'm just trying to find a fair, and I agree with Commissioner Jolin that it's unlikely to happen. We are just trying to manage this concern, and to some extent, it is weird because, on one hand, it's not that different from other situations, but there is this peculiar circumstance that at least raises the possibility that there might be an impact there because it happens to have a big maglev line easement. So anyway, that's my proposal, and I'd be happy to hear questions about it from the commission, and ideally, if not, a motion to approve subject to that condition, not the staff conditions, and you don't have to go to the trouble of restating it, it's in the record. So if someone's prepared to make that motion, I'm prepared to accept it. You're not required to do so.
Unless there's any other discussion, I'm happy to make the motion.
Well, we can have discussion afterwards on the motion. So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. So again, it's approval, not with the staff conditions, but with the condition I just outlined, which is in the record. We can refine it if necessary, or I have some notes. Is there further discussion on that? Mr. McCoach.
I want to make a comment that when this related topic came up at our last meeting, I made the point that it's really unfair right now to leave undeveloped, unimproved land. Thank you. Any development in Baltimore, and as a person who's driven down St. Paul Street for 25 years at the 23rd Street, where we've had a fenced-off lot in the middle of that neighborhood for decades, I just don't think that we want to be doing that without any end game. So it's simply, this landscape proposal is simply a way to provide some mitigation of uncertainty. So I'm very happy with what you propose as language for approval. It meets my objective.
Okay. Again, any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? Do we need a roll call on this? I'm sorry, I always forget.
We can, sure. That's probably better. Traditionally. Robin Allen.
Approved.
John Bullock. Approved. Talib Horn. Approved. Claudia Jolin.
Approved.
Doug McCoach. Approved. Justin Williams. Eric Stevenson. And John Lario.
Approved. Thank you all very much.
Next one's
The next and last item on the agenda is City Council Bill Number 25-0040, zoning use retail for small box establishments citywide. Brandon will.
Afternoon, folks. I do know a couple of people were out in one of the other conference rooms. Is everybody in from there? Okay, perfect. Then with that, we will go ahead and get started. My name is Brandon Canoy. I am here to present City Council Bill 25-0040 regarding retail small box establishments within the city of Baltimore. Whoop. Some batteries in there, it buzzes. So the proposal before us today is to add a new definition in our zoning code that will create something called a retail small box establishment. We'll get to the definition of that here in a second, but that would be considered a conditional approval through the Zoning Board of Adjustment in all commercial districts within the city if this is approved. The quick and dirty background on this bill is back in 2022, state of Maryland passed enabling legislation to provide Baltimore City with this express power. Enabling is in quotes there because the current or former writing of the Maryland Code, which enables Baltimore City zoning, did not prohibit any of this. So functionally, it just added an extra definition, but does not increase or change the zoning authority of the city of Baltimore. This bill from the state, which was approved, did initially cause creation of City Council Bill 23-0431, which was reviewed by the Planning Commission and recommended disapproval, which ultimately did not pass through City Council during the last session. That bill was markedly different from what is proposed today. 23-0431 basically copied the state law. In this case, we have taken most of the state law, but some pieces have been removed to better align with our city code. We will discuss that here in just a second. So for everyone's reference, the state code, the reference is listed there in case anyone really wants to copy the link. It is listed under section 10-306 for zoning requirements and community agreements on small box stores for single jurisdictions within Maryland. The only major difference here, which is not in the proposed amendment to our zoning code, is this mention of a community benefits agreement, which would be a contract signed by recognized community associations and the applicant for a specific permit. That was removed from this one, given the various and sundry potential legal pitfalls that could come from such an agreement through the zoning process, and is not in this portion. Dispersal regulation would allow the city to set a minimum distance, like shy distance, between this specific kind of use, and then the rest of that is generally just defining everything. Grocery store, pharmacy cites the state code articles, and then the definition for a small discount box store, which is included in the proposed change to our zoning code. Retail store of no less than 5,000, of more than 5,000 square feet, but less than 12,000 square feet, generally looking to get at those small goods sellers that have a smaller footprint and generally turn over low price goods in various communities. There are a number of exemptions in both the state law and the proposed change to our code, which is a grocery store, a pharmacy, including compounding pharmacy, a fuel stop, a retail store where the majority of products are personal hygiene, and a resale store. And then on this slide, just restating that Baltimore City is technically allowed to establish a dispersal regulation and establish this use as a conditional use as opposed to anything else, and then add some conditions there that we could consider if we decide to add that to our code. We will jump through there because the last part, it deals with the community benefits agreement, which is not part of the consideration today. This is the proposed language that would be added to our code if approved by the city council at the end of the day. It does restate the 5,000 to 12,000 square foot limits. One addition is the definition that a retail small box establishment is required to be part of a chain with 10 or more locations in the city of Baltimore doing business under the same name, regardless of their ownership structure. That's a point that we will get to here in just a second. And it, in general, copies the line for offering for sale assorted inexpensive general goods, and also noted in the proposed zoning change, or proposed change to the zoning code, are the same exclusions that are listed in the state law, just with our language instead of theirs, but the impact is the same. Additionally, it would add the definition under section 1-312 before property line, before right-of-way and roof deck. This is just a clerical change, but it's included for context for clarity. This is the proposed radius, which a second location would not be permitted a business license within the city if it is within a half mile of an existing small box establishment. This is part of the proposal that is echoed by the state law, which would allow the city of Baltimore to establish a shy distance or radius around different uses. In addition to creating a new use, this proposed zoning code change would create a special discontinuance standard for any use that falls under this category. Normally, our standard, if something goes out of business, you've generally got 2 years to restart it or sell it and give it to somebody else for them to restart. In this case, discontinuance would be capped at 1 year. So it's a full cutting in half of the permitted uses and reuse of the property. And if any portion of the property is brought into conformance, that portion is not permitted to return into nonconformance. That's pretty standard for any nonconforming use. Then, let's see, this is the 30 days part. Discontinuance constitutes an abandonment or discontinued nonconforming use. If you stop for more than 30 days, that's when the clock starts. and a discontinued use would not be able to be reestablished, or any subsequent use would basically be kicked out. And then abandonment of use provides a definition that provides standards for staff to determine whether or not a property has actually been abandoned that we can compare against observed changes on the property. And it would add here to our commercial districts permitted uses table that retail small box establishments are conditional through the board in all commercial districts. This is a rough approximation of existing uses that would fall under this new definition. This was created back when the first council bill came through about a year or so ago. We don't have any reason to believe that this has substantially changed. The blue dots are the actual locations, and then the radius around them is that half-mile radius. So anything where a dot is inside the circle of another, that would become a non-conforming use if this bill were to be approved. And in general, this bill doesn't necessarily increase the authority of Baltimore City to regulate zoning and uses. Those powers already exist within our zoning code. This is more just adding another definition, which would require substantially or a greater level of attention during reviews, and it would increase the level of review that the BMCA would need to undertake if a new location were to come in. Lots, since there are 5 different excluded categories, it would be very easy under this current language for any proposed use to, for example, say, well, I'm not a small box establishment, I'm a fuel station, if they just install some electric vehicle chargers, which are currently permitted as a fuel station use whenever Baltimore City updated its code to, instead of just having a gas station, a fuel station is anything that can refill or recharge your car. And in general, the motivation for this bill is largely directed seemingly at the operation of small box establishments, which isn't necessarily the best conduit for regulating how a business operates through the zoning code. That's something that's generally addressed more through a licensing scheme or something of that nature where there are specific standards for operating and maintaining your business as opposed to what you can do with the land. So we do have a couple of recommended amendments for form and legal sufficiency from our partners at the law department. First Amendment recommends the deletion of lines 9 through 11 in their entirety to better align the definition and remove some loopholes. I do have it mocked up on this next slide where red with strike through is proposed language that is recommended to be removed, and any new language is proposed to be added in blue. So we can see here that for form and legal sufficiency, it's recommended that the definition for a retail small box establishment remove the 10 or more location standard and better define inexpensive general goods from a subjective standard to something that's much more mathematical, where you can look at the cost of the actual item or its equivalent adjusted for inflation. Second Amendment, recommended for form and legal sufficiency, is to better define the grocery store and I believe convenience store, fuel station, better provide definition for fuel station, citing back to the existing definition for fuel station in the zoning code. And then there's that definition for the grocery store. So that way you can't just say, I'm a grocery store. You have to be able to actually prove it.
Brendan, can you back? When I read this and I was just curious, in Roman numeral 3, do you mean permitted or define? I mean, it's a definition. Retail small box establishment does not include a fuel station as otherwise, is it permitted? I'm just trying to understand what you mean by that.
We copied this directly from the memo.
Okay, all right.
Defined maybe better.
No, I don't think it's that big a deal.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then throwing a lot at you guys, but we've got one final amendment recommended for form and legal sufficiency. It's the deletion of the non-conforming uses in their entirety, and that would instead revert to the regular standard for non-conforming uses. This part was recommended to be removed. Oh, and it also removes the half-mile barrier between uses. These were recommended to be removed because the city of Baltimore is required to hold all conditional uses to the same standard, and setting up a completely disparate standard for a single use could open us up to some substantial legal challenges. But it removes the barrier requirement as well as the non-conforming use and discontinuance or abandonment standards.
I'm sorry, can you
go ahead.
Clarify on the removal of the barrier requirement? Isn't that kind of the crux of the bill?
Correct. Functionally, this adds a new definition to our zoning code, and that's about it, if the recommended amendments are added.
Just to add a little bit of context, since I staffed the earlier edition of this, this is possibly one of the cases where the zoning code is not the best tool for this. We understand kind of intellectually what the target businesses are. We want dollar stores. How do you define that in a zoning code so that you catch the businesses up that you want, but don't catch a mom and pop store or something that you don't intend to include? The pharmacies, the gas station convenience stores, those kinds of things. It's difficult to do that in a way that works. Now, this is much better than last year's attempt. So we wanted to be supportive of the concept because it's important to our neighborhoods. Then we got law's advice of, yeah, but there are still some concerns. We're not sure how to engineer a better solution as we sit here today to make this do what the sponsors wish to do. Again, a license scheme would probably be the best way to get at it, but that's not what's in front of us today. So we support the idea, and we may need to defer to law department to suggest what other tools or options there may be that would pass legal muster, that would do the things that the sponsors want, but not do things that they don't anticipate or don't want. So that's why we are offering that, because we figured it should be something that the commission should discuss and debate, but we don't have a tremendously good answer at this point.
Okay, are you, Mr. Canoy, are you done? Are you, yes?
Yes, sir. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Well, we are privileged to have two council members here who are both sponsors of the bill, as well as a third who is sitting here at the table. So I'd ask first if the council members, any of the three of you would like to be heard, or all of the three of you, would, and you're certainly welcome to just, watch, but somehow that seems unlikely. So please come up.
Besides the two of us, we also brought some community folks to give testimony so you can understand and hear some of the dilemma that they are going through. Specifically, I have folks here from an area that brought this particular idea to my attention that has been a problem, and that's the Liberty Heights corridor, which basically is the center of like 4 or 5 communities, Ashburton, Forest Park, Dorchester, Callaway Garrison, and just a little history there. Recently, the Walgreens closed there. It's a Family Dollar right behind that. There's another convenience store on the corner, and then we have Dollar Tree, all in the same area. So this is just an example of what's going on around the city. So I appreciate your attention to this legislation, and Councilwoman Ramos and I, of course, kind of lost the first round, but this is so important really for the city and for the residents and constituents that we all on the council represent. And this is really kind of we look at it as a proactive approach to help businesses, to help our communities flourish. It's legislation that is really going to help take our city to another level. And for some reason, Baltimore is always the city to kind of start off a lot of firsts. And we look at it as this. So there are four main things that I think we paid attention to. We have been working with the law department. Also, Johns Hopkins has been doing a study really around most of the city on this for a few years as well, and this is something that they have done on their own. So this legislation will help establish specific use standards for new small box discount stores to ensure they align with the community needs and zoning requirements. For a community concern piece, there's growing concern about the impact of these stores on local communities, particularly regarding their effort on local businesses and access to essential goods. For the economic impact, while these stores offer affordable shopping options, their concentration can negatively impact local businesses by drawing customers away. And number four, the health and nutrition piece. The clustering of dollar stores may contribute to the creation of food deserts, limiting access to fresh produce and healthier food options, which can really increase our health disparities. Lastly, I would like this bill to define key terms related to small box retail establishments to provide clarity and ensure effective regulation. We believe that with your support, this legislation can pave the way for more resilient and inclusive neighborhoods. And we want to thank you again for this consideration. And I now bring up Councilwoman Ramos that would give her added piece. She's, she's kind of like the housing guru, so she is very keen on particulars about this bill, especially the added, I guess, amendments. The first two, we kind of agree with. The last one is a no for us, but you can go ahead.
For the record, For the record, for those of you who've been under a rock for several decades, that was Councilwoman Sharon Green Middleton.
I am so sorry.
Council Vice President. No, I just want to get it in the record. We know who you are, but
Yes, and I represent the 6th Council District, longest serving on the council, going into my 19th year.
Councilwoman, thank you. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Vice President, for your leadership on this. Thank you to the Commission for your time, the second time. I want to ask your support for this bill. And as the Vice President said, the idea here is, especially with the study that Johns Hopkins did, which Senator Washington, my senator, passed the legislation at the state level, commissioned a study, and we did attach the study to testimony, so you should have it in your file, about the impact of these stores. And yes, people say, oh, it's a dollar store, it's $1. Well, they end up selling stuff for a smaller amount or a bigger amount, a smaller amount for $1. You have to buy more of them. We know that they have been very poorly managed all over our city. And as you can probably guess, they're only concentrated in certain areas. And so what our bill does is add the category to the zoning code as a conditional use in all C zoning. And the reason to do that is you'll notice that it wasn't to eliminate them, right? It was to have a conversation, right? So that they would be forced to have a conversation with the community and the zoning board about their impact in the community. We took from the last bill to this bill, we took the community benefit agreement out because we had to. But as you all know, one of the things that at least I've done in my district and the Vice President has done in hers, and I believe the councilman has done in his, is that in a conditional use situation, you could have MOUs that the zoning board has been much better about enforcing. And so it's not a community benefit agreement on the technical side, but at least it's an agreement on how things are going to move forward in the relationship, right? And the community can still have a say in what's happening. So that's what we were trying to do. Now, the distance part, the half a mile, is important because, again, I don't have two next to each other, but the vice president does. It makes no sense, right? Why would you do that? But also, it just concentrates so much in one area. And then the last part of the bill is to take the conditional use completely away if that store decides to leave. So on Green Mountain 32nd Street, we had a Dollar General there where the old Rite Aid was. We were sad to see the Rite Aid leave. The Dollar General came in and literally lasted 2.5 years, and they're gone. And the idea would be to prevent another one from going in by saying they'd have to come back. If they're going to put a new one in, they have to come back to the community. So that's what we were trying to do here, to prevent the automatically putting in another store within the 12 months, right? Okay, so that was our bill. We're asking for your support on that. The amendments that the law department is asking for, the first one is about what they're asking for in their first amendment. In our original language, it talks about, thank you, super helpful. It really just, it's very, very clearly geared to those big like chains that we all know that we can't mention their name in legislation because they might change their name, but we tried to do it so that it's clear it's a big chain. What the law department is saying is that's discriminatory. Why are you picking on these big ones and you're not picking on the little ones, right? So that's unfortunate. That's not the intent of our bill is to deal with the big ones. But if we had to change the language, at least what ends up happening is that, for instance, if another Herman's wanted to move on to Greenmount Avenue, Herman's is not going anywhere at all. It's been there for 25 years. It'll be there forever. But let's say another one wanted to go in, we at least would have, under their amendment, we would still have to have that conversation with them, okay? It wouldn't be preventing them, it would be the conditional use. So we could live with that, okay? It's not great, it's not perfect, we can live with it, okay? The second one is about clarifying the definition of grocery store and the fuel station issue. Good idea. We should definitely be very clear about what we're talking about. Mr. Chair, to your question about the fuel station thing, let me just tell you, when we did the zoning code modifications, the vice president remembers this. We had this very long and detailed discussion between a gas station, a fuel station, and one other term, and decided to put it all under a fuel station, which I still don't agree with because we have to distinguish, I think, between the EV charger stations and the fuel stations. But anyway, I lost that debate. It's something that we'll have to revisit at some point in time. But I understand the point of what the law department is saying and the planning is saying is that if they put a EV charger in the parking lot of a dollar store, then this could exempt them. We don't want them exempt. Good idea. So we'll take it, okay? The last one is the problematic one. So the law department wants to remove the half-mile situation, and they want to remove this idea that the conditional use goes away immediately, okay? So on the half-mile piece, I think it's really important. I mean, I know we've done it for... There is precedent, I think. They didn't mention this in their report, but I think they should. There is precedent for doing this relative to liquor stores, right? You know, you have a certain amount of feet between a liquor store and a school, and, you know, so it's not the exact same, but it's similar. So I think we do have precedent for that, and I'd like to put that back in. And the other piece is this issue of the abandonment of the conditional use. So I get that it's totally inconsistent with the rest of the code. That is just too bad. That's something that we can probably deal with when we revisit all of the modifications. Is that something that we want to do for everything? Is it something that we want to do for some things? I don't know, but we want to do it for this one. And there's also precedent for this. I have a conditional use property in my district. It's 1423, 1432 Carswell Street. Humongous house, right? Residential zoning. And there was a after-school type of program doing some case management and all of that wanted to go in. And we were able to agree that the conditional use for a community center would be conditional, but then part of that MOU, and the Planning Commission agreed to it, is that the conditional use goes away immediately. It's in writing, we've done it. You approved it, this body. And so, or the zoning board approved it because it was a conditional use. So.
Immediately, other
Yes, in the MOU that we put together for that particular instance, and the zoning board agreed to it. So it's not like this hasn't been done, right? Well, I kind of worked around the system and made it happen, but we made it happen. So I'm asking that that third amendment not be accepted by this body, and we will be saying the same to our colleagues. So the first two, we're okay. Not great, but we'll deal with it. This third one is where we're going to go to the mat on. And I still have to get through the rest of the law department's report to really understand why there's some legal things here. But I do appreciate that they were working with us, because initially they completely didn't like the last bill. A lot of the language that was in the state code was just not what we could use. I don't think state legislators should be doing zoning, but that's my opinion. And so luckily, Senator Washington made it all a may and not a shall, so we were able to be much more flexible to be able to put in a bill that I think will work for our communities. And again, it's not an outright ban, although that would be the ideal situation. It's really about having this conversation with the community and setting the standard. So that's the response to some of this, and I would ask for your support.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Bullock, do you want to speak separately on the bill?
I'll just say I'm in full support of my colleagues. I know we've had several conversations around this, most recently at our council lunch, and so most of us are co-sponsors as well, so we definitely understand it. Thank you for the great presentation.
And we have someone
Vice
here.
President, yes.
Yes, we have someone here from, a representative from the Healthy Neighborhoods. Is that true?
We're happy to, let's just, I'm sorry,
okay.
no,
I'm sorry.
anybody who wants to speak will have a chance, Councilwoman, no
Okay.
problem.
Yeah, thank you.
Are the council members okay?
Do you have any questions for us?
I do not have any questions. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the council members?
I guess the question for anyone, it was just, did you or we explore the licensing idea that has been raised?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to speak to that. I'm so grateful, Deputy Mayor, that you brought that up. So we do not have business licensing yet. We will at some point in time. That bill did pass, and it'll be, put together at some point in time. But that is a long way off. I don't think that we'll have the office open and all of the businesses licensed, and the whole thing about enforcement of the license and conditions on the license for years, because we're just starting this off, and our communities need relief immediately. And so that's why we need to move forward on using the code as opposed to waiting on the business licensing. And I fully support the business licensing bill. I was a co-sponsor, but it's a long ways away before we'll be able to do that.
Okay, just please raise your hand if you want to be heard on the bill at all. I've got a number of people, is it on the gentleman as well? Is there anybody here are you in support of the bill? Those in support, please raise your hand. Is there anybody here who's opposed to the bill? Okay, so everybody's in support. Ma'am, why don't we start with you? Please come on up, introduce yourself. I would ask you to take no more than 3 minutes. And for those testifying afterwards, if you, please try not to repeat, but, do the best you can. We're happy to have you here. Ma'am, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Jones. I am an Ashburton resident. I support all of the Liberty Corridor efforts, and Healthy Neighborhoods is also in support of this bill. Thank you for allowing me a couple minutes to speak. I am not against, like I stated, I am for basically eliminating the proliferation and saturation of small box discount stores. They are direct competition to grocery stores. As was mentioned, they employ fewer people, and they limit the desire for alternative options to invest in disenfranchised neighborhoods. As of 2019, I just want to state for the record that as of 2019, every 6 hours a dollar store was opening. That is more than McDonald's and Walmart combined. This is not to discourage, but to encourage economic business development and to encourage a diversified portfolio. I'm going to give a couple of things, because even though Baltimore is a trendsetter, it's a lot of cities that are implementing these types of dispersal or formula-based restrictions. And I just want to note that Transform Baltimore, y'all's own code policy, is to promote health, safety, and welfare. And dollar stores, and Family Dollar, Dollar Tree, have some of the most egregious OSHA violations, and they can afford to pay them. Not to mention that proliferation decreases home values in healthy neighborhoods, which is a direct conflict to healthy neighborhoods. And if you go into them, the safety of the actual employee with the blocked emergency exits, 1 or 2 staff in the entire building, I just want to bring that to the forefront when you guys are not thinking about tax base or business development, but the safety of the citizens and the employees that are being affected. Not to mention that the food, your second brain is your gut. And we are giving people subpar food and wondering why crime rates look the way they would look. So I'm not against dollar stores. My family would have a mutiny. They love to get knickknacks and things. But we really need to think about how many can come inside of our city. And when you guys are fighting for things like supermarkets and areas have 4 within walking distance, that's a huge problem. And if you talk to certain constituents, they're not educated to know, Councilwoman Ramos mentioned it, if you go to Sam's Club and you buy soap, let's say it's 65 cents a bar for a greater weighted bar. If you go to the dollar store, you're paying more per unit for lesser. So we're actually eroding the wealth of our citizens, not to mention their health. So I want to bring attention to Transform Baltimore and plead to you all that yes, the licensing is ideal, but it's not ready. And we are drowning trying to revitalize. And we have so many things that are distracting from that effort. And I just want you to hear the plea in my passion project. This is my personal passion project, to look beyond what your code is and look to the health and safety of your citizens. Thank you.
Ma'am. I'll take whoever would like to come up. Sir, please. And again, if you can keep it to 3 minutes, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Lawrence Campbell. I'm a resident of the Ashburton neighborhood, a resident of Baltimore for 58 years, and I pay my taxes. I happen to be the chair of the WBC Community Development Corporation, which is located in the Forest Park community of the concerned citizens of Forest Park. I live in the 6th Councilmanic District, the 41st Legislative District, and the 7th Congressional District, and I vote in all my elections. That preamble was shared to provide that I am an active citizen in my community. The proliferation of dollar stores are a blight on our city, and I'm not happy about it. I protested the Family Dollar store at 3801 West Forest Park Avenue, which replaced the Supreme Oasis restaurant, and the dollar store at the Dollar Tree at 3804 Liberty Heights, which is 1 block away and resides in the old Rite Aid building, and the Family Dollar store, which is located at 5100 Liberty Heights Avenue, which is 1.7 miles from both. These stores were built in the Forest Park neighborhoods, the Dofield Garrison neighborhood, and Howard Park neighborhoods without approval from the associations. I am in opposition to these stores because they're debris-filled lots and unsightly trash-filled locations. They're just nasty. Excuse me. They may provide a service for discounted goods, but they leech customers from the 2 major grocery stores on Liberty Heights, which is Shoppers and ShopRite, which we fought to be able to establish in our communities. As a student with a marketing and a business degree, I understand their marketing plan. However, this is one of those N&I stores, not in my neighborhoods. I understand the rules allow them to set up shop where the zoning is in place for a commercial building, but there should be some common sense applied to the vision for the communities and the desire to have safe, sustainable, commercial contributing businesses. These dollar stores take and do not give back. In my estimation, they are a blight and they're too many and too close together. There should be a 2-mile separation. I was sitting in there earlier and there was a prior discussion by the chairman, and he said that you look at the gateways as we come into the city. Liberty Heights is a gateway. You're coming in from the county, you don't want to see dollar stores coming down the road. Thank you, Lawrence Campbell. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Who's next? Ma'am?
Do you need a copy of this?
You certainly, if you, it's in the record, but if you'd like to leave it with us, that'd be fine. Let's leave it with the. Thanks.
And I have a written testimony filed in the previous version as well with
Right. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Diana Emerson. I am the Executive Director of Waverly Main Street. Within our corridor, we have 188 businesses. The majority of those businesses are small businesses, mom and pop businesses. They are minority-owned, women-owned, LGBTQ plus IA, all small businesses. The dollar stores, as we try to work with them and create local MOUs that are held by not just our Main Street, but many of the main streets within Baltimore City, we work tirelessly to make sure that they withhold all the things that are in those MOUs. 9 out of 10 times, they do not comply. We have a dollar store that Councilwoman Ramos mentioned before that moved into our area at the end of 2021, going into 2022. The community was adamant about not wanting a dollar store. The dollar store told us, but we would bring you fresh food in an area where we have the oldest farmers market in the city, an area where we have a giant less than 5 feet from their dollar store. That particular dollar store lasted 2 years. To date, we have over 75 311 calls in reference to trash, in reference to rats, in reference to 911 calls that have happened from the dollar store. They are not good for our communities. They're not good for our commercial districts. In our corridor by itself, from York Road all the way to 25th Street, we have 5 dollar stores within a 1 mile radius, all selling cheap things that will break, which means people are going to spend more than $1 on a regular occasion for the same products that they could get quality from our local businesses. It makes a huge impact on our small businesses, as many of them have to now hire additional security because the petty theft almost doubles as soon as they come into our area. So I am in support of any type of activity that will restrict the dollar stores, not just within boundaries, but also their practices. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I have one quick question for you. You mentioned MOUs not abided by, et cetera. Would making it a conditional use and then allowing the board, as Councilwoman Ramos outlined, a condition of the conditional use so that there would be some enforcement mechanism, I presume that would be helpful to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As of right now, when we do our general community MOUs, there's not a lot of enforcement.
Right.
My enforcement is calling 311, calling my councilwoman, calling, anyone who will listen.
Understood. Okay. Thank you for everything you're doing on Waverly Main Street, too. It's great. I think we've all been to the farmer's market many times. Yes, sir. Please come on up. Great. Thanks.
All right, so most of them stole some of my thunder, so.
That's what happens when you're fourth. But if you could just introduce yourself for the record.
Okay, my name is Dwayne Alexander. Everyone knows me in the community as Wayno. The director of LWD Consolidated Trust, CDC. We're Community Redevelopment Corporation. We try to, alongside of redeveloping our community, we try to play a part in redeveloping the people. I came here because my business is in 07. And there's a population of 49,000 people there. I grew up in 21215, population of 52,000 people. And in between those two communities that are right next to each other, we only got 5 food markets. But we got a whole slew of dollar stores and a whole slew of drama that comes from that. Another big issue that I'm pretty sure everybody in the room know is that we are the food desert. We can talk about how it's spread it across Baltimore, but our area is that. You know what I mean? So you're talking about 42% of the population of Baltimore that are living in the food desert, and these are people that are without transportation. People that do have transportation, still 24% of them are in that same area. You know what I mean? And just like they talked about the trash and the plight that comes from these dollar stores, we're not seeming to get any help from the business owners, alongside of them not reflecting the values of the people in our community. Alongside of that, it has been pretty difficult for us only because we're the ones that are cleaning up after them. You know what I mean? So I wanted to make that apparent because for the people in the community, it seems like, I'm not saying like you all, but you all are out of touch. I've sat in a couple of your meetings and it seemed like the statistics didn't even match up with what you were quoting. It was like, yeah, we have this amount statistically, but that can vary. You know what I mean? And that vary is what's killing us. You know, so I have a partnership with the Maryland Food Bank. I also have a partnership with the Jewish Community Network. And with our partnerships, we were able to feed up to 500,000 people in the past 5 years. And it played a major part in putting a dent in the crime. Because we have guys that say, man, if we didn't get food from y'all today, I don't know what I was going to be doing tonight. And that is a regular thing. One of the guys actually walked up to our food drive and pulled his gun out and showed it to us. He said, this was my plan for the night, to feed my family. You know what I mean? And we're still talking about adding more dollar stores instead of food markets. We got Highlandtown that is a big example for us all. They have the highest concentration of food markets in Maryland. They have Asian markets, Italian markets, Spanish markets. We got 5 markets for over 100,000 people. Thank you for your time.
Perfect timing. Your thunder was not stolen. And thank you for bringing a future community leader with you. I see you've got, thanks for being here. Okay, is there anybody else who wants to be heard? Hearing none? Okay. Discussion, commission? Mr. Vice Chair, it looks like you're ready to start. Are you? I didn't mean.
Yes,
but
I am.
You,
No,
you seem to be warming up there.
My reading of the law department's memo relative to the half-mile restriction wasn't that it was completely unacceptable. They just said that it should be tied to a rational, it should be rationalized and tied to the city's goals. And so it seems like that should be something that we could do.
Okay. Do you, not to put you on the spot, but do you feel similarly about the discontinuance piece? If you've thought about it, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I think the discontinuance piece, I think the law department might have a little bit more traction on that one. The buffer, I think there's value in exploring the rationalization, especially because it's so critical to the intent of the bill.
Okay, let's, do you mind, Commissioner Jolin, will you go next?
Yeah, absolutely. So I absolutely agree with the zoning. When I read it through what the law department said, I think my issue with the abandonment one is that we, planning department, planning commission, we say, perhaps this shouldn't be in zoning, it should be somewhere else. I think I hear that often. It should be in business licenses or in different, and what I'm struggling with is in 2025, what we have is zoning. That is what we have that we can do with businesses that we particularly don't like in our neighborhoods. And so when law department says the court will not likely find any rational basis for this abandonment issue, this is our only tool currently that I can see to make decisions in these businesses we don't want to proliferate throughout our city. So until then, that would be my argument back. Clearly, it's not a legal argument, but it could be justified in all the things that we've heard today. So that's where I would slightly disagree with the stance on abandonment. I would say, you know what? Well, this is the tool we currently have, and I would like to support that.
Okay, Commissioner Allen?
Two things I want to say. I forget the first, it'll come back, but the second thing was, as I recall, there's also precedent about the distance, the radius factor with billboards. That's what it was. Okay, I remember the first. I'll come back to that. With billboards, that was a very difficult fight And I believe ultimately we were able, prior to the more recent discussion of signage, we were able to enact some restrictions about how many billboards you could put within a certain radius. So there's precedent, as I recall, if I'm recalling correctly. Although I didn't like it, I did understand the law department's point in saying that we're discriminating potentially against these very specific types of stores. And if I understood what I saw in the presentation, I think I am in agreement with, if I understood it, it seems that we've come up with, or our position can answer to that. Did I misunderstand that?
Well, go ahead.
We think that the way the distance requirements have been relaxed, that it does offer the industry, if you want to call it that, viable options in the city.
Well, apart from the distance option, the height, the specific, the part that addresses the specific, without naming them, this, you know, they went through a whole list.
Oh, yes,
of
I think the
things that-
definitional issue is pretty clear, and it sounds like, we can come back to this, but it sounds like the sponsors have accepted it, and that was law department making a contribution from their professional judgment.
Okay,
Yeah.
because that was a huge thing
Yeah.
with the more recent issue with signage that I still carry over from billboards towards the signage. And I remember the big issue was content, which I kind of align with this, you know, we wanted to address some of the content and restrict certain types of signage or certain content in the signage. And we were told by law you can't do that. I saw that as very similar to this. And although I don't agree with it, the outcome or I would rather that we be able to restrict it because I understand everything that everyone here said. I saw the point that the law department was making.
The signage content has been governed by a Supreme Court decision since, I think, 2006.
Right, and I'm saying I saw a connection between that and specifying, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble articulating, but specifying the very particular type of small box establishment. The presenter said earlier that that was, looked at as discrimination. So again, I reiterate,
Understood.
I didn't personally agree that, I was disturbed by that, but I understand that legally, that that's an issue. So I hope
Thank you.
that what has been proposed sufficiently addresses that. And if it doesn't, then we can come up with something that does.
Okay, Commissioner McCoach.
Sure. On the first reading of the legislation, I was pretty concerned about the definition and the looseness of the definitions. And I'm very pleased to see that between the law department and planning, we've been able to arrive at least on the definition side, an agreement. So that's got my endorsement. The issue of the geographic separation, I think we've done that elsewhere, and I still think that stands as a reasonable approach to regulate. The discontinuance issue is, I think conditional use is a great solution here because it does it just establish a basis for a dialogue with communities, which is really what you have to have. And that's great for new installations, new shops. It doesn't really help us with existing. And I found myself going, we got 30 days, then we got a year, and suddenly the calendar pages are flipping. And it really might be the case that once we get the licensing requirements in place, that will be a quicker remedy than sort of having to just watch the calendar and wait until we can sort of move on to a new tenant or a new operator. Nonetheless, in the sense that this is what we got to work with. I'm kind of like, this has been a frustration for our city for so long. And, you know, it's possible that in the period of time in which there is a legal challenge, we may be able to get another mechanism in place so that when we do confirm that we can't do what we want to do, we've got a plan B that we can work with. So I'm inclined to just sort of go along with this notion of the discontinuance, expecting that, you know, through further, with time, maybe there's a even better solution available to us.
Commissioner Horn.
I guess for me, I tend to lean on our law department in terms of their recommendations. However, when Eric spoke, I do think and so I'm very happy that there was some agreement with Amendment 1 and Amendment 2. I hear you clearly about Amendment 3. I tend to lean with the rest of my colleagues on the page 3, the half-mile dispersal requirement. I do think you have a rational basis. I think the page 4, that's where I think I'm going to lean more with our law department. But I appreciate the testimony, and I do think you clearly shown sort of the rationale for the half-mile dispersal requirement. I'm just not there yet for the other one on page 4.
What was page 4? Or Amendment 4?
Yeah.
Amendment 3.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
4, I mean, it depends on whose version you're looking at. 4 would, let's just say for discussion that 3 is the radius and 4 is the discontinuance. Or you can call them the radius and the discontinuance, whatever you prefer.
I guess at the outset, yeah, I recognize and support the impetus for the legislation. I guess my minor quibble, I guess maybe it's worth us asking or me exploring too, the licensing piece, because I'm thinking of, we have a late night operations license in place now, and I thought we could do a one-off license without having the full licensing regime for all business licenses established. That might be a narrowly tailored license requirement for this, and the reason I think that might be more effective is I'm worried about enforcement from city side. It's like on the front end, the existing stores, we know Dollar General and we know the dollar store as clearly falling into this box, but I'm worried about the ones that like a Five Below that are getting caught. But maybe we don't care as much about it. Maybe we do, but there's gray areas that'll be harder to identify. And then even the radius restriction, thinking about even across the harbor. I think I saw the map that had like in theory half-mile.
Right.
As a crow flies is different in some areas, and I guess maybe here doesn't really, maybe it's not catching it here, but thinking about that kind of situation where I get the idea of a dispersal, but this sort of goes back to the rational basis is, and I'm worried this Hopkins study is not very robust and doesn't give even the rational basis, but maybe with time or the council committee hearing, they can articulate what the rational basis is for a half-mile specifically from, I guess, door to door on that. My other concern was, yeah, I guess similarly the implementation, if the lease is under negotiations, maybe like 180 days as opposed to 30-day implementation for the bill. But maybe we don't care as much. So, so that's one of the considerations. And those, yeah, I guess those are my pieces. Yeah, and just the city side, I guess I'm still worried about the definition too, because except for the ones we know that are clear and obvious, like a Dollar General, how are we going to enforce the majority of the stuff being sold being $5 or below in price? But that gets we'll have to cross that bridge potentially. That's why I think licensing might be a more harmonious way, but that still have the same issue of defining it. But I guess we can get there.
Thanks. Okay, thank you, everybody. I did want to, before I offer a couple of comments, I did want to acknowledge, and these are in the file, but we have letters, emails of support from Rhonda Wimbish and from Jessica Morgan. They're there. I've certainly read them. I'm sure other commissioners have read them as well. Was someone here? Were one of those two ladies here? I'm sorry, it's hard to keep track of people's names. So good. So two additional voices. So I just would say that, what's interesting about this is from historical context, and many of you will know this, certainly the council members will, when we went through Transform, there was this aggregation of uses, right? Everything, if you remember the code pre-Transform, there were, 157 different uses that related to sort of retail establishments, and they were anachronistic and old, and we aggregated them. I think what you're seeing now, frankly, is the course correction on some of that aggregation. Because we're starting to realize through council members, constituents, or whatever it may be, that there are uses that might otherwise be within a category, an aggregated category that actually need a little special treatment because of the different impact they're having on the communities. So I think it's actually a very rational and healthy and correct use of the conditional use concept. So I think I just want to say more broadly, it's like the system is sort of working the way it should. It's kind of gratifying to see us now considering these conditional uses and other such things. And I certainly agree overall with the intent of the bill and with the issue that's been diagnosed. And I particularly like, and that's why I also highlighted it with my question to the representative of Main Street's, the Councilwoman Ramos's comment, that it's also a way to get conditions that are enforceable because you have the conditional use permit that you can use as leverage. I do recognize that it only is prospective, and I realize that's not going to cover everything. So on the bill itself, I think it's very easy to agree with the textual changes that I think everybody has agreed, including the sponsors. So those to me are easy, and I appreciate the sort of guidance, professional guidance from law. With respect to the other two, I have sort of mixed feelings about them, but it's only because I guess my day job requires me to be anxious when I read those sorts of things, and it makes me wonder, well, and honestly, I'm not my own lawyer nor the commission's lawyer, so it's a little bit, I'm trying to rely on our lawyer, who's the law department. What I was going to suggest originally was that we approve the bill with the amendments that I've just described regarding text, and that we simply, for the record, don't object to the third amendment, the third or fourth, however you want to call them, amendments, and defer to the law department, because, it just seems to me to be a purely legal issue that's going to get resolved along the way. To be honest, though, I've been convinced by my colleagues as we go around the table that one of them is very debatable, the other is slightly debatable, and I have no problem if someone wants to make that motion, just supporting the bill without those amendments, letting it go forward, as a way of showing support for the council members and for their constituents on this issue. I don't really know what will happen, and to be honest, from time to time, and this is not exactly this. Maybe this is this kind of issue. Maybe it's not. Sometimes you just have to provoke the issue and see what happens, because we don't really know. It's not like there's a case out there that says you can't do this for dollar stores. The law department is doing a fine job of doing legal research and making analogies and the things that lawyers do. So I have my doubts, but I also recognize that if it is somewhat unclear, and if the council sees fit to proceed, they'll of course consider in the hearing the law department recommendation. I'm sure there'll be a similar discussion about these things, but I would be comfortable for the commission's purpose proceeding as I described. So with that, and I think this is the consensus, and if not, tell me, I think I would accept a motion that approves the textual amendments, and I don't know how we're referring to these, Mr. Tiso, I don't want to mess up the record, but what I'd call the textual amendments is amendment number 1 and amendment number 2. And then we would not accept amendment number 3 for the purposes of the Planning Commission's recommendation. Is that correct?
I think if you subdivide Amendment 3 into 2 pieces.
Do you want, that's fine.
Because
It's
there was a
little bit of difference, yeah. Okay. Well, let me, okay. Straw poll, I mean, since we're talking about it, the third, amendment number 3, or whatever we're calling it, the radius restriction, who would be prepared to support the radius restriction?
I think we want to keep the radius restriction, and the recommendation would be for the drafters of the bill to rationalize it per the law department's recommendation.
So I'm sensing that there is the majority of those present would prefer to keep the radius restriction, which is another way of saying reject the law department's amendment on that point, correct?
I didn't read it that way. I'd be open to being explained otherwise, but I read it as not the law department saying, no, you can't do this. Simply, if you do it, it should be rationalized.
So I understand it, but what I'm what I'm wrestling with is just that there is an amendment from the law department and from the staff that says strike it.
Right. Well,
And
I
I'm
thought
saying-
the amendment, I thought, and again, correct me, that the amendments were from the staff based on the law department's memo.
Well, either way, they're on the sort of they've been presented to us, and
But yes, I'm scratch those amendments.
right. So that's now. Let's just turn to the other one, which is the abandonment question. Do people feel similarly about the abandonment question at this point?
I think there's value in the abandonment clause in the short term.
Yep.
And also in support of the council. I don't believe that it's the final solution to this situation, but it's something that can move the situation forward.
When you're done.
Well, I would just say, so with that in mind, I would not accept the amendment proposed by staff and law, but rather let the language play through.
So I know this is complicated because they sort of were like double negatives and so on. So let's do it this way, okay? We'll just do it in 3 parts. It's pretty easy to do, okay? And we'll just combine them all for the recommendation. So the first question is accepting amendments number 1 and 2. Is there a motion to accept those amendments?
Motion to accept.
These are the textual amendments. Second, is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, so 1 and 2. Now we'll turn to what I'll call amendment number, let's go to that page. I'm going to call it amendment number 3A. It's okay, we'll keep track, which relates to the recommendation to strike the radius restriction. So if voting for the amendment strikes the radius restriction, right? No, we're going to vote. I mean, we're just going to have to decide. I mean, people have to take a
But I
position.
understand what you're saying. We have to vote against staff's recommendation.
Let me just do it this way. Again, I'm sorry, it's hard to.
I get it.
Let's just do it this way. We're going to vote for the radius restriction or against the radius restriction, and Mr. Tiso will convert that.
There you go.
Can I make just one other note why I think this is important? Because the conditional use process, BMZA is obligated to approve the conditional use unless it violates XYZ, the standards of the conditional use, and it's usually public health, neighborhood, et cetera. So if we don't put anything in here for them to be in violation of, such as the half-mile radius, BMZA this will not have any teeth because BMZA will not have any grounds to deny a conditional use, despite a conversation and community testimony that may happen without something to point to.
Well, that could be debated, but right now, I mean, it's right, but because it just depends on how you look at what the BMZA is able to do. So, is there a motion to? Is there a motion to accept the law department's amendment or the staff's amendment regarding the radius restriction? So we'll go back to my original formulation. If you vote yes, you are going to strike it. Correct. If you vote no, you're going to keep it. So those of you who are keepers, vote no. Those of you who are strikers, vote yes. Okay, is there a motion? work with me here,
I don't
Mr.
want,
Vice
I
Chair.
don't want to double negative. If I make the motion, I'm going to
I
double
can't,
negative
it's got to
you
be,
again.
we don't have a choice between, we're going to have extra motions. It's not
Okay,
worth
listen,
the trouble.
Motion to keep the radius provision.
Fine.
So let's keep it at.
Second.
Thank you.
I'm
Want to roll call that?
I do, oh, yes. I definitely want to roll call. So
Robin Allen?
So move to, right. So the motion on the floor is to keep the radius restriction in.
Robin Allen?
Approved.
John Bullock?
Approved.
Talib Horn?
Approve.
Claudia Jolin?
Approve.
Doug McCoach?
Approve.
Justin Williams?
Approve.
Eric Stevenson?
Approve.
And John Laria?
Approve. Okay,
For clarity, who was the second?
Mr. McCoach.
okay. So now we'll use the same approach. So is there a motion now to keep the discontinuance language in, keeping in the truncated discontinuance?
Motion to keep the discontinuance in.
Yes, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, for all the reasons I explained earlier.
Yeah, please, no more reasons. Got it. Okay.
right.
Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, let's take a vote, please.
Robin Allen?
Approve, keeping it in. That's what I'm voting for, right?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
John Bullock?
Approved.
Talib Horn?
I'll approve it.
Claudia Jolin?
Approve.
Doug McCoach?
Approve.
Justin Williams? Eric Stevenson?
Opposed, I think.
Sure?
I think that we should strike the.
Right, okay, so you're opposed, fair enough.
And John Laria?
Approve. Okay.
We're done.
Thank you. Okay. All right, let's have some order, please. Okay. Is there,
Thank you.
is there anything else on the agenda, Mr. Executive Secretary?
That's it.
Is there a motion to adjourn the formal portion of the public portion of the meeting?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Without opposition, the meeting is
No.
adjourned.